Welcome to Red and Blue. I'm Robert Costa in Washington. Thank you for joining us. Basketball star Brittney Griner now heading home as part of a prisoner swap with Russia. In exchange for Griner, the U.S. released a convicted arms dealer known as the Merchant of Death, Viktor Bout. Griner was arrested at a Moscow airport in February and charged with drug trafficking after Russian officials found vape cartridges containing oil derived from cannabis. President Biden says she is in good spirits. He also reiterated his administration's commitment to bringing home other wrongfully imprisoned Americans, including retired Marine Paul Whelan, who is still detained in Russia. For more on this story, Margaret Brennan and Ed O'Keefe join us. Margaret is CBS News' chief foreign affairs correspondent and moderator of the terrific Face the Nation. Ed is CBS News' senior White House and political correspondent. Really appreciate both of you being here. Margaret, you sat down earlier today with the Secretary of State, Antony Blinken, to talk about this development. Let's listen to your interview.
It was totally unacceptable that Brittney Griner was behind bars herself, and Paul Whelan remains behind bars. And that my number one focus is on righting that wrong and ending that injustice. In the case of Viktor Bout, these are hard decisions. And ultimately, those of us working for the president make recommendations, give advice. He's the one who has to make the hard calls, and he made a hard call. Viktor Bout's been off the playing field since 2008, which is a very good thing. And he served about half of his sentence. At some point in the years to come, he was going to get out. And I'm glad at least that we were able to get Brittney Griner home.
Margaret, what's your assessment of the Secretary of State's answer to your question, and how are different constituencies here and abroad evaluating this decision?
Well, that phrase, at least, is an important one. The White House is arguing that it was left with no choice, either take the single trade or don't bring any Americans home. Russia had turned down earlier offers of a 2-for-2 swap, a 2-for-1 swap, saying no, this will only be about Brittney Griner. And Viktor Bout was very important to the Kremlin. It was the Kremlin and the White House communicating through intelligence channels, the FSB and the CIA, passing messages back and forth. In terms of what precedent this sets, that's a big question. And as we've been talking about, there is some outcry among law enforcement officials who chased Viktor Bout around the world, trying to prosecute him and put him behind bars. In fact, America fought to extradite him from Thailand so he would be here in prison. And then he was used in a trade. So there's some frustration there that this sets a dangerous precedent that shows if you capture the right famous American, you can get something, Vladimir Putin, you really do want. But as you heard the secretary say, they felt like they really did need to try to bring her home, and that was a top priority. But then it raises questions of who was left behind.
The administration, Ed, is facing questions not only from Margaret, but also from Weijia Jiang. She was at the White House today asking Karine Jean-Pierre a question. Let's hear that exchange.
Was there a risk assessment to determine how dangerous Bout may be now that he's been released back into the world?
This was not a decision that the president made lightly. Just want to be very clear on that. We will always stay vigilant about our national security. That's something that the president will always do, and we will act swiftly to protect it. That was true yesterday, that is true today, and that will be true after Mr. Bout's release.
Ed, what's your latest reporting on this front?
They anticipated that there would be criticism like this. I think they understood at the White House and the State Department that by leaving Whelan behind and still leaving him there in Russia, there's going to be criticism and after-action review of why exactly Griner, who'd only been there for 10 months, got precedent over Whelan. But, you know, we should point out these two cases were never linked. They were completely separate incidents. Whelan has been detained now for almost 4 years on different charges in a different situation. And even the Whelan family today made very clear in its statement, as angry and as impatient as they are, justifiably, in awaiting his release, that they are different situations and they want any American freed. And that seems to be the bottom line, that there was an opportunity to get one more American released. They took it, and they will continue working to get Whelan returned. And as Margaret knows better than anybody in this building, the State Department has an office that deals with hostage affairs, that is working around the clock to free people, not only in Russia, but also in Iran, in Syria, and in other parts of the world that have been unlawfully detained. There's a handful still in Venezuela, for example. Some were released earlier this year. And it's something they're working on constantly at the White House, at the State Department, and embassies around the world.
Margaret, to build on Ed's point, you pressed the Secretary of State about what's next. What else will the United States do to deal with people who are being held by adversaries around the world? What did he say?
Well, you know, I find these hostage cases fascinating because oftentimes these are just average people who end up being used because they have one valuable thing in their back pocket, and that's a U.S. passport. And that becomes leverage. And that becomes leverage against the President of the United States. And so that is the risk here, you could argue, is this shows if you get a famous American, maybe you get even more. And so that's one of the criticisms here. I think for what Ed's point was is hugely important, having followed so many of these hostage cases, there are at least 3 Americans behind bars in Iran. Their families are absolutely desperate. One of them has been there for 7 years. You don't know their names. You know Brittney Griner's name, but she is very well known. She had a huge public push behind her. And you know what? That public pressure does make a difference. So for journalists like us, we do constantly ask about these people, like I asked the Secretary today about Imad Shargi and Siamak Namazi and Murad Tabaz, just 3 of the Americans being held in Iran. And they are stuck in a situation where it's just as difficult as things between the U.S. and Russia. The U.S. and Tehran are in a really bad spot. The nuclear talks have fallen apart. Iran's selling weapons to Russia. Getting those Americans out right now would be really tricky. And this always has, as you know, political blowback. Who do you prioritize? What do you swap? Is there a money transfer that goes alongside of this? So all of these things are the big, tough decisions the commander-in-chief has to make. But this is a big chessboard here.
Is there anything that could change the dynamic with Iran regarding the prisoners you mentioned?
Well, there's been, they insist at the White House that these are separate tracks, separate in perhaps negotiations, but they are linked. And so that is one of the concerns of the family members, that as they see the nuclear talks collapse, that means Iran will only put a higher value on the heads of their family members. And so that's why one is linked to the other in that way. They are desperate to know if there's a plan B. And how to bring those Americans home. But in other countries around the world, it's the same thing. And to the credit of Cherelle Griner and Brittney Griner's agent today, when they released a statement, they made a point to list the names of other Americans. And they've banded together to help each other get more publicity.
I saw that, the solidarity among all of those who have gone through this experience. And just, Ed, quickly, what about the Republican response to how President Biden and his administration handled this?
Well, you heard it from John Bolton. You heard it from Rick Scott. You're going to hear it from others in the coming days who've raised concern about the swap, about the idea that a convicted arms dealer and someone who had sought to kill Americans overseas was swapped for a professional basketball player with a minor drug possession charge. Was that an equal trade? We'll see how far those criticisms go. We'll also see whether it becomes perhaps part of what Republicans want to do in terms of oversight and accountability once they control the House next year. But again, I think the White House had a good sense of the potential criticism, but also the relief and the political win that this is. Let's be frank. I mean, the idea that the best-known American-held hostage overseas is back, and that her wife was there this morning with the president early when it happened, and that image was seen not only across the United States but around the world, is yet another feather in a cap of a president who's on a pretty good stretch right now. And obviously, the push to get Whelan continues, but they're mighty happy at the West Wing to know that that this happened safely and successfully, and they'll press on in the case of those other Americans.
A busy day of reporting for Margaret Brennan, Ed O'Keefe, their colleagues, and their teams. We really appreciate both of you stopping by and sharing your reporting.